How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
What if the biggest threat to your privacy, your security, your very identity wasn't some random hacker in a hoodie?
What if it was a spy using the same exact strategies and tactics that the FBI uses to catch a double agent?
Stay with us as we go deep with former FBI operative Eric O'Neill, uncovering the real motives, the twisted methods, and why cybercrime might actually be the ultimate spy game.
Scared yet? Welcome to What the Hack, the true cybercrime podcast. I'm Adam Levin.
I'm Beau Friedlander.
And I'm Travis Taylor.
Eric, welcome to What the Hack. I saw the movie Breach, where you were played by Ryan Philippe. Very impressive. I read your book, Gray Day, and met you while you were on your book tour. You have had a fascinating career. You took down one of the biggest spies in American history. You've taken cybersecurity head on. Take us back to the moment when you realized that you were involved in this incredible spy hunt.
Yeah, certainly, Adam. And by the way, it is great to be on What the Hack. This is going to be a lot of fun. Going back, I went into the case, which is a little bit different. So you read the book, you know the movie. In the movie, it wanted a big twist in the center. And so in the movie, movie version of Eric O'Neill, if I can keep all the versions of my life in my head, goes in thinking, I'm investigating this, decorated FBI agent because he's got some bad proclivities, some perversions, right? And then in the middle of the movie, oh my God, he's a spy. In real life, I went in doing what I did with every kind of case. I'm going undercover to try to catch a potential spy. And my big twist was learning about halfway through the investigation that he wasn't just a spy or a potential spy, he was the spy. So to give you a little bit of history, Robert Hanssen turned out to be the spy that the entire intelligence community had been after for over 2 decades, a spy that was only known by the code name Gray Suit. And everyone had been looking to this legendary spy. It was smoke and mirrors. People weren't even sure what agency that this person was in, whether it was even a him or a her. And finding out that I was sitting across a desk day in and day out from Gray Suit, it was extraordinary. It was mind-blowing. And it really reaffirmed for me that this was an important case, that it was something that I had to stick with, that I wasn't getting out of it, and that I had to win. A little bit of trivia, when we know there's a mole somewhere, when there's a potential spy, the FBI gives them a code name. And it can be generated just by two random names, right? Or nouns. So Hanssen was Gray Suit was subscribed to the spy that we couldn't find. And every time you were investigating someone who might be Gray Suit, you give them a derivative name. Hanssen's code name was Gray Day. And there were plenty of other Gray something or others before him. Most of those names are still classified, but Hanssen was given the designation Gray Day, which kind of should have tipped me off, but I just didn't make the connection right at first until later. I realized, this is one of the Gray Suit spies, and in fact, it is him. And that was real serious. And at that point, I could feel the presence of the moment, how important this case was, not only to the FBI, but to the history of counterintelligence in the West. And I truly did not want to fail.
So were Hanssen's methods kind of techie, or were they more analog, James Bond era kind of stuff?
Well, the majority of Hanssen's espionage was cyber-based. So what made him so incredibly unique as a spy is Hanssen was able to steal information from computer systems that unfortunately the FBI were just never built to defend against a trusted insider. So in cybersecurity today, when we're talking to companies, when we're talking about how to build a cybersecurity architecture, when we're talking about how to protect data, you have to understand that data. You have to understand who's accessing the data, and you actually have to do a little auditing. And the FBI wasn't doing that. Computers were still something pretty new. There were a lot of agents who were still using typewriters. And this is the year 2000, just to give you an idea. And they weren't auditing access to the automated case system database. And that system is a database of all the FBI's cases, right? And it would show up on this ugly monochrome screen, and you would call up the record, and you could do some limited searches by name or address, which is what Hanssen would do. He would look up the names of potential Russian intelligence officers, and if a case came up, he knew that we knew they were spies, and he could drop that information. If you didn't have access to a case, the record would still come up. It would just be starred out. So you would know that there was an active case. You could just type in people's names and find out if they're being investigated. He was able to steal information by data mining that, and no one was auditing his access. Whether someone was looking at a database they shouldn't be looking at, or they didn't have access to, or they didn't have clearance, or what we said, need to know, right? Then they would have caught Hanssen very quickly. But unfortunately, the FBI wasn't looking. He was also one of the first spies, probably maybe even the first, to drop data, to drop his information and data. Because remember back then, through the Cold War, and then suddenly Hanssen decided that he wasn't just going to take a bunch of paper and wrap it in a trash bag and put it under a bridge. It was a lot easier for him to just save all that on floppy disks. And we caught him before he got to thumb drives. And he was actually going back and forth in some of his later letters with the Russians to try to get them to exchange Palm Pilots with him. So we would have one of those first technological exchanges. So he would save all the data on a Palm Pilot because, man, he loved that device. And then he'd drop that, and he would receive a new one in the drop with his cache. And so he could keep going back and forth with two encrypted Palms that only he and his spy masters out in Moscow knew the decryption for. So he was very clever.
For our listeners who are probably more interested in this story than probably staying cyber safe, I mean, who wouldn't be? The consequences. Why was Hanssen so important? What happened as a result of his skullduggery?
Sure. Well, let me put it this way. My career in the FBI was based on counterintelligence. And counterintelligence is simply the science of stopping spies from doing what they want to do, from stealing secrets, from spreading misinformation, from doing everything from destroying information to changing it to stealing it, and all of the other mischief they do. And so the whole science of counterintelligence is stopping them. In a nutshell, Robert Hanssen gave up how we would proceed in counterintelligence in the US. He gave up our game plan. And that made it a lot easier for the Russians to win. And it turns out that because of Hanssen and a few others, most notably among them a CIA spy named Aldrich Ames, the Russians during the Cold War were ahead of us. We had no idea, I should say, the Soviet Union. They knew what we were doing before we were doing it. Many of our major operations were compromised before we even got them off the ground. And between 84 and 85, we lost every single one of our assets in the Soviet Union. They were all summarily arrested or executed, sometimes pressed into hard labor. So we were completely blind. If there were a nuclear war, Hanssen had given up our nuclear warfare plan. So we would be at a disadvantage. Now, I don't think anyone wins in a nuclear war. Even if you know the playbook of the other side, he also gave up our continuity government plan, so the Soviets would have known where to attack and where we would send our government if there was a nuclear war, and so much more. So he was a bad guy, and he took very little of the secrets he gave. Damage was in the billions, and he only took a few million. Part of that was so he wouldn't get caught. He was smart, and he was ruthless in what he gave up. He knew that most of the information he gave up would lead to the deaths of people in the Soviet Union, and he did it anyway.
That's terrible.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there is one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
With everything you experienced in the Hanssen case, did you start to see parallels between traditional espionage and what we now think of as cybersecurity threats?
Absolutely. Even during the Hanssen investigation, I began to formulate many of my theories that I've been using for the last decade plus and trying to explain cybersecurity in a different light. I constantly say there are no hackers, there are only spies. And that grows out of something that Hanssen told me called Hanssen's Law, which parallels very well the traditional espionage. And here we're talking cloak and dagger, dead drops, disguises, clandestine meet, signal sites, drops of money under the white rock or in the hollow tree or under the platform in an obscure park. And what we're seeing today in the world of cyber attacks, which are using a lot of the same deceptive, coercive practices that the spies of yore use just to compromise a person to gain access to data without even having to get on a plane and leave Moscow. So Hanssen, in our first conversation ever, the day one of this investigation where I met him for the first time in room 930 on the 9th floor of FBI headquarters, all eager and trying to catch a spy, looks at me and asks me if I had heard of something called Hanssen's Law. And I said, okay, this is interesting. I'm supposed to be recording everything for the analyst. I started little tape reels in my brain going, and I was like, tell me what that is. And he said, Hanssen's Law is this: the spy is in the worst possible place. Now, if you're in my position, right, I'm hearing this guy who's supposed to be a spy tell me that, and I'm thinking, what is he doing here? Is he just trying to throw me off? But I kept a good poker face, and I stared back at him. I said, what do you mean by that? He's that person who has access to the information that's going to do the most damage and the knowledge and the wherewithal to get it in the hands of those who will pay him the most for it. And that is what we're here in the FBI to defend against. That's also cybersecurity. That's what we're doing. That spy is always in the worst possible place because he is the person going after your data. And one of my taglines right now is that data is the currency of our lives. It is the most important thing we can protect. Everything's data. You don't go to a bank and get out gold. The secrets that your companies protect, all of our most critical personal information. Even the pictures, the photos that you've collected of your children through their entire lives that are priceless. That's all data. And all of it can be compromised by an attacker, a spy, a criminal who fools you and then gains access to it and can do the most damage with it. For a criminal, that's ransoming back to you.
So, from your perspective, what's the most significant misconception people have between spies and hackers?
There is a hacker. And I try to dispel this notion all the time of the hacker sitting in a basement, typing away at a keyboard. It's always a black hoodie, right? Not every movie and TV show. And somehow after typing a lot, they hit one key. And what do they always say? I'm in. Like, right? Into what? Every single one. That's like the line for the hacker. That's all fiction. That's not the way it works. Like, computers aren't magic. They don't just connect and you're able to just use code to breach everything. The majority of cyber attacks are modeling the best of traditional espionage. So let me explain. All right. the number one way that cyber criminals successfully attack is through a spear phishing email. Even though we've known it, we've heard about it ad nauseum, there's all sorts of training on it, it's still the most successful method of breaching security. You send an email that gets somebody to trust that it's true. And they're getting more deceptive and more clever and better at this as we go on. And AI has helped quite a bit. And we can get into that too if you want. But that email that comes across, a consumer receives it, an employee receives it and looks at it and thinks it's true. They use what's called reconnaissance. That's old tradecraft. Now, before you're going to go breach a facility, you're going to spend a bunch of time watching it, knowing the ins and outs. When is it open? When is it closed? What's the security on the doors? How are you going to get in? It's the same thing for a cyber attack. You have to understand your target intrinsically. And fortunately for criminals, we give everything to them with social media. They know more about us than ever before. It makes espionage and crime so much easier if you're a target and I can learn everything about you, Adam, by just going through all of your social media and everything that you put out there for me. I don't even have to dig very hard. It's great for investigators too. I run a company that does background diligence as part of our portfolio, and so much of it is right there in the public. So criminals are modeling spies, and that is what made them so adept at crime. In fact, not only are they modeling the spies, they're hiring them. Cybercrime syndicates, not a kid in a basement, but dozens and dozens of criminals who are incorporated as full businesses using the dark web as their base of operations, are hiring intelligence officers from the top tier spy agencies to come work for them. And I suspect a lot of it is their moonlighting, right? They get their pay cut, they get their paycheck from the Russian SVR, FSB, or GRU, and then at the same time, they're doing some side work for cybercrime groups, the big Russian cybercrime groups, and they're not paying taxes on that. So it's very lucrative.
You're also, we're also leaving out of this particular ecosystem all of the for-profit hacking happening out of the African continent, specifically mostly these days, South Africa. And a lot of that is geared towards getting heroin into Europe and doing other things. But what we know about that world is that it is as evolved and developed and really impressively organized as anything you would see in Silicon Valley.
Absolutely. You're incredibly, that's totally right. Like a big cybercrime syndicate like Lockbit, which is now at 3.0, or Black Suit, or any of those big cybercrime syndicates, they all have names, and then the FBI and Interpol smashes them. They come right back. They just restore from backup, and they, just create a new name. They all sound like comic characters, but they're organized incredibly efficiently. They have full business units. They have a finance department. They have a help desk. They will help you unlock yourself from the ransomware that they seeded all of your systems with. Very pleasant tech support who will teach you how to decrypt what they encrypted, as long as you've just paid, because they want you to be a return customer. They have everything from affiliate programs. So if you want to get into the ransomware business, you can just join their affiliate program. You just have to cut them 25%, right?
Well, but they also have like crack teams of developers who are creating new and improved ways of screwing people over. And, so when we get into that topic of screwing people over, my colleague Travis takes umbrage, and he has, I believe, well, you'll hear he has a troublesomely deep voice, and he really likes to, try to protect people. So what's on your mind, Travis?
I like it.
You mentioned spear phishing before, and I'm just kind of wondering, when we talk about cybersecurity, the idea of an attackable surface is usually a pretty big concept there. What is the biggest attackable surface that most people have?
Right. Your biggest attackable surface is your people. The majority of the big attacks, like look at the MGM attack, right? Where a cybercrime syndicate was able to take down MGM's network in Vegas. That was all of the MGM class of hotels. And it turns out, like as I was doing the research for my book on this case, MGM owns like half the hotels in Vegas. I knew they owned the MGM Grand, but I didn't know they owned the Cosmo, which is my favorite, and Aria, and all these others. They did a bunch of reconnaissance on LinkedIn, learned who the systems engineer were, then learned the particular cybersecurity, including what kind of two-factor authentication MGM used through Okta. In a 10-minute phone call after they did all their preparation, they were able to social engineer the IT support into not only resetting the username and password for the systems engineer they decided was going to be their target, but also resetting the two-factor authentication.
Oh, wow.
And they used one of their affiliates, another group called Scattered Spider, that's really good at deceptive attacks, the impersonation attacks. And that's how they got in, and they were able to take Vegas down. MGM was losing over $1 million a day. The total amount that they reported is over $100 million. In that 1 week period, they're down by ransomware. Slot machines weren't working. They were actually putting cases of water bottles in all the elevators, just in case elevators got stuck mid-floor. That's how bad their systems were affected. That human threat is the largest attack surface in any organization, and it just takes one person to make a mistake that gets around the robust cybersecurity that's put in place to try to protect that data.
No, and if you think about it, they took a very analog approach. They just picked up the phone and convinced somebody that they needed certain information, which obviously they'd gleaned by high-tech methods. But okay, so this isn't just about cache or passwords. They're after data, right? And why is data so valuable? Is it like it's like a currency, right?
Certainly, data is the currency. In fact, data is currency. I mean, all these criminals trade in Bitcoin. They're stealing that too, in cryptocurrency, different kinds of cryptocurrency. But if you think of the data that we control, if you think of the data a business controls, and once again, what I like to say, the difference between a spy and a cyber criminal, the only difference is the outcome. They're both using the same tactics to deceive, infiltrate, and steal data. Espionage, right? The spies, they want to extract data quietly and disappear and hope you don't find out for a while so they can use it. The criminals want to smash and grab at the end. They do the same thing, quietly stealing, and then they smash and grab, lock with ransomware. You say, I have a backup, and they say, fine, here's all the data we've stolen, and now we're extorting you. If you don't pay, we're going to publish it. We're going to sell it. We're going to use it for massive amounts of identity theft that cost you millions in privacy concerns and litigation. The criminals understand how powerful data is and how critical it is for all of us to protect it. And they know it's a weak point if they can access it and steal it.
Well, we've also heard about, the triple threat, which is you're paying to get your data back, you're paying for that data not to be released, and then they go to people in that database and say, what's it worth to you for us not to release your data?
Exactly. Or take it the reverse way. The attack against Kaseya was very clever. That was a cybercrime group that attacked Kaseya. Is a wonderful company that just provides different tools, including to some big government agencies. They attacked Kaseya, used a Trojan horse to send an update to all of their downstream customers. And then they went to Kaseya after all these customers are locked with ransomware because they installed a update through the supply chain attack. Then they went back to the mothership and said, if you give us $70 million, we will give you the master key. You can make all the lives of all your customers better. That's pretty clever. It saves a lot of time to go customer to customer, customer by customer and say, you got, pay us $10,000, or you can afford $20,000, or you can afford $1 million, right? And I guess they end up not paying. There was a lot of pain, but they understood that when you pay, one, you'll be a repeat customer. Two, you encourage more cybercrime. And three, you have no assurance that they'll actually do or deliver what they say they will. They might just take the money and run.
What's the largest sum of money you've heard that has ever been paid for a company to recover from ransomware?
Yeah, the largest that I know for a fact was paid was $40 million. And that is the name is escaping me. It's an acronym. It's a finance company out of Chicago.
CNA?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was CNA. Yeah, because they didn't pay. There have been many more ransoms, up in the million, now in the hundreds of millions. What happens is every time these attacks become more and more successful and these organizations pay, it goes up. So there's a lot of inflation with ransomware as well, particularly in these critical infrastructure attacks. The ransom demands are huge when they can take a city down or a major piece of critical infrastructure, light, power, water in the US or any Western country. It's going to get worse. I think critical infrastructure attacks are rising and are going to be the next big wave in the oncoming years of successful cybercrime and espionage. We know that the spies are already embedded in our critical infrastructure, ready for any kind of future war. They're preparing. Even if that war never comes, they're ready. The criminals have understood that, learned that, and know that when critical infrastructure is attacked, and right now they focus on hospitals because, hospitals and medical centers, because they don't tend to have the same robust cybersecurity as, say, your power plant. And there's huge pressure to pay when you can't provide care to all the people in beds that are desperate for that help.
Now, we've seen where hospital groups, healthcare organizations have been literally brought to their knees, where people are using pen and paper, that operations are being canceled, appointments are being postponed. It's a real life and death situation. So obviously these guys want to pay because they can't afford that kind of exposure.
They can't afford the exposure. They're losing their patients to other hospitals. They have to literally load them in ambulances and take them somewhere else for care. There was a case where a criminal, he was actually a trusted insider, attacked a hospital, and he was able to manipulate the air conditioning system where the medicine is stored, which would have destroyed or caused a lot of that medicine to go bad. The investigation was done. It turned out that he was actually the night watchman in the hospital who was a hobbyist cyber attacker. And he held his own hospital, but he had access to the nurse's station, which is where the penetration happened overnight when he was doing his night rounds.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtual Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your virtual pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
Hey, this is Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast, here to help you make the most of your summer with Michelob Ultra, a superior light beer worth playing for. Play for it with the guys when you're competing to see who can sink more birdies on the golf course, because winning tastes even better with Ultra on the line. Play for Ultra. Fill your fridge with Michelob Ultra this summer. Enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025 Anheuser-Busch Michelob Ultra Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.
For somebody listening right now who is just trying to understand why we're talking about spies, a hacker is a spy, it sounds like.
Yes, so I don't like...
That's just what they are. A hacker seems like... Or you don't like the term spy, or you don't like the term hacker?
I don't like the term hacker. I'm an old hacker. Some of you got hackers. Hackers to me are, Gen X people from the 1980s who played around with security and were pioneers on computers and now work for cybersecurity companies. Founded them, started them, do things like me, are thought leaders. Spies, cyber attackers, cyber criminals, cyber terrorists. That's the lexicon we need to use, because I try to dispel the myth of the hacker all the time, right? Because when you say hacker, it's a kid in a basement. If you say cyber criminal syndicate, you're thinking of dozens of people who are spending all their time trying to come after you, just like a spy agency. And that's my point, because that's what we're up against. There are lone kids out there that are trying to do this, and they get away with it. And it's a 500 a pop ransomware attack on a college kid. But the organizations that are coming after big business, government, charities, hospitals, those are cybercrime syndicates, cybercrime groups, cybercrime gangs, whatever you want to call it, but elevate the thinking to a term that distinguishes them. And to answer your point, Bill, the cyber attacker is a good name for all of them, because cyber spies and cyber criminals are using all of the same tactics. all the same tactics to do what they do. And in my book, I line them up. Some of the cases of cyber spies doing these incredibly innovative, clever attacks. And then that same year, sometimes just a month later, a cybercrime syndicate models that exact attack, except the only difference is it ends with ransomware. So they're watching, they're learning. Because if you're a criminal and you want to make money and you want the shortest path to making money, you're going to do bad things to do it, then you're going to look at what's been successful before and model it. And espionage is, they're the best of the best.
So are there particular tactics you use to catch spies that are essential in tackling cybercrime?
Absolutely. In cyber, when you're looking for a spy, so let's think of a trusted insider, a person within an organization that's gone rogue and spying. In the modern day, it's not, let's train everyone to be psychologists and spot the narcissists and all the employees are looking at each other. That doesn't actually work. It's actually using technology. Use technology to catch a physical trusted insider the same way you would catch a virtual trusted insider, what I call an outside attacker who has penetrated the data networks and has compromised an account and now is puppeting that account within an environment and stealing data, right? You get the guy sitting in cubicle 3D that's stealing data. And now that we're all working from home, maybe they're just doing that anyway. Or you have that same person who's had his username and password compromised by someone who spear phished them. Those are both trusted insiders. It's just one is doing it maliciously and one has no idea that he's being used. In order to discover that person, whether it's the outside person or the inside person, you have to understand your data architecture. So when I'm doing cybersecurity advisory services, first thing I look at is how well a company, an agency, understands their data. Is it all over the place? Are people just saving things willy-nilly? They're in buckets and in different drives and servers and low is saved on their personal laptop on hard drives that go home and back and have no encryption or security? Or is there a central data architecture structure that has security built around the most critical areas? Because that's what you want. And then you have to have a system to understand who is accessing that data and when, and do they have permission to access that data? And if you can do that, if you can understand your data so intrinsically, if you have what we call context in your data, then you can catch the spy because it's that person that doesn't have access, but is accessing it anyway. It goes right back to where we started, Adam. Robert Hanssen was getting away with it in the FBI because they weren't looking. And if you're looking for the person who's accessing information that they shouldn't access, that's your early warning system. Your technology sees it fast, it locks them out, and then your humans, investigators come in and find out whether it's just an inconvenience for that person and we're going to restore your access, or they might actually be a spy.
So as you say, it's more like culture and education within an organization as opposed to technology?
It's actually both, yes. You have to have the technology or all the training doesn't work. So the technology and the data architecture is critical. And that's where we're layering on all of the cybersecurity, like endpoint security and now XDR, network security, so that you can actually see the flow of data within all of your networks, within the architecture, and understand who's accessing it, when they're accessing it, and do they have permission to access it. That's how you catch a spy. You have to have that level of detail. And then, of course, you're leveraging technology, which is way faster than a human, to make those judgment calls for you. And this is where cybersecurity is leveraging machine learning, or now we call it AI, to say, this doesn't look right. Eric logs in usually from about 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. He's a hard worker. He works in this area of the company. He's accessing these networks and this data, but suddenly he's accessing from 2 a.m. from a different country, and he's accessing a data bucket that he's not supposed to access. Let's lock him out, right? Flag it. It gets routed to cybersecurity, the CISO's team. They look at it, call Eric. Where the hell are you? What are you doing in Germany? That kind of thing. And then you find out whether there's a problem. Well, maybe Eric's at home and he's like, why'd you wake me up? It's because I got spear phished the day before and now somebody is using my account to steal all this information. That's how you do it.
It's a behavioral analysis then, right?
Yes, it's understanding data, it's understanding your employees, it's understanding what looks good against what looks bad. So known good versus unknown bad, right? If you know what the good is supposed to look like, then you can make those judgment calls, analytical judgment calls on the bad. And hey, if someone gets locked out of their account and they're, inconvenienced for an hour or two while cybersecurity is doing the work to find out if there's a problem, that's a lot better than having a major ransomware attack.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. The trade-off for all things cybersecurity is convenience.
Yes.
And I was once told that humility is the willingness to be inconvenienced, which I always liked. I thought that was a really smart thing to say, right? Okay, I'll wait. No, you go first or whatever. There's humility in that, unless you're, just doing it for show. But the willingness to be inconvenienced is super important. Many of us have seen comedians make jokes about how we'll freak out at our phone if an email doesn't go out.
Right.
When we were kids, that was going to take a week and a half. Inconvenience is a big one, right? What is the biggest misconception people have about the situations everyday human beings face in the world of spies, whether they're tailor-made spies for stealing your money or stealing intellectual property?
Right. Yeah, I think that, well, two things. One, I think, let's take it to say cyber attacks in general. People think it can't happen to me. I'm not important. I don't matter. I'm not big. I don't make anything anyone would want. That's completely untrue. Cyber attackers, that's spies and criminals, but mostly criminals, don't really care how big you are. They don't care what you do, how prominent you are, how important whatever you're making or selling or the service you're providing is. They only care if you're vulnerable. They will go after the least common denominator, those who are the most vulnerable. All data is valuable to you. So when you say the spy is in the worst possible place, he's in the place where he has access to that data that is so valuable to you. He's always in the worst possible place for you. And the criminals know it. If they can compromise you, they'll steal the data. And then they'll ransom it back to you, or they'll just destroy it maliciously if you don't pay. I wanted to come right back to something you said earlier about inconvenience, because everyone asks, what's the number one thing I can do to help protect myself against cyber attacks? And it's so simple. Turn on two-factor authentication everywhere. But it is so resisted. Just that extra step, right? I put in my password. Why do I now have to get a text and add another number? Or, I put in my password. Why do I now have to open this extra app on my phone and tap it? Or open this other app and get a number and now type it in? That little bit of inconvenience is the difference between a cyber attacker successfully stealing your data or not. That's it, right there.
Well, here's one that I do, Eric, which I think you'll appreciate. It's Byzantine in the level of inconvenience I allow myself. Every single pathway to money for me, be it a credit card, a debit card, any kind of financial account, I not only have two-factor authentication, but I also have it locked in the app. So if you want to go to the bank, you don't get to just take your ATM card out of your wallet and insert it into the ATM or tap. You actually have to open the app, unlock your card, then tap. And I'll tell you something. I did that because I was sick and tired of being, inconvenienced by getting hacked, by having my credit card number stolen. So you know how I don't get hacked?
Right.
I just lock it all down.
Sent to you
Put a hard hat on.
Right. I have two teenagers and they have their starter bank accounts, which are checking accounts with debit cards. And my daughter calls me frantically. This is a few years ago. She had her bank account cleaned out. We could see all of the transactions, and it was mostly local. It was like food delivery, clothing, makeup. I was like, it's got to be someone wrote down your number and is doing this. We started investigating, and I figured out who it was. But it was a lesson for her, and one, security over your technology. But what we also did is we never had overdraft on, which was good, right? And two, I opened up a savings account for my kids And what they do is they keep everything in the savings account that isn't tied to the debit card at all, right? So the only way is to go into the bank and move it from saving to checking. And when they want to buy something, they move from saving to checking and then make the purchase. So they're doing the exact same thing you're doing. I think it's great. They have to do a transfer for the amount that they want. You keep everything in your checking account, and there's a debit card tied to that checking account. If that debit card is compromised, someone could ostensibly steal all your money. But if it's all sitting in a savings account, it has no external access unless you transfer it into checking and then make it. So you see, the point here is we have to do all this stuff. And like, for example, I say, I'm an email archaeologist, right? When you're looking at an email that you get, you have to not just assume it's true, you have to assume it's an attack and find a way to make it true. So you're doing that archaeology. Maybe it's a better analogy, but carefully dusting the bones. You're like, you got the fedora and the whip, and you're going through the cavern and you're avoiding the spears, and you're like, stay out of the light. And it's that level of care and caution. You gotta be Indiana Jones with this stuff, because that email that's coming across to you, that comment in social media, that random text, all those ways that external attackers can access us personally, through a medium that is not face-to-face, are the most damaging thing that can happen as far as a cyber attack, if you fall for it.
Do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
I think cybersecurity is hard. The attackers have a bit of an advantage because they can sit around all day dreaming up new attacks, and security tends to be reactive. We find the attack happens, we learn all about it, we find ways to prevent it, and then the bad guys are all on to their next thing. But security is getting better. If we want to make the world safe from cyber attacks, if we want to move the needle and beat the trillions of dollars that go through the dark web, the cost of just cybercrime in the dark web is $12 trillion, which makes the dark web the third largest economy on Earth. If we want to get ahead of this and not help this economy grow, then every single person has a part to play in cybersecurity. Every one of us. Make it harder for the attackers, and the harder we make it for the attackers, the more of them will dry up and go out of business. That's really the goal right there.
Well, and it fits in with everything we've always talked about on the show, which is the ultimate guardian of the consumer is the consumer.
Yes.
And it's a shared responsibility. Anyway, Eric, thank you so much for sharing your insights and giving us a little peek behind the curtain in a world that most of us only know from movies. So if people want to learn more about Eric O'Neill, where do they go?
Certainly. Well, the best place to start is my website. It's www.ericoneill.net. Everything you want to know is right there. Please, if you go there, click the top banner that says Start Here and subscribe to my newsletter. I put it out weekly. It always starts with a fun story from espionage. It's called Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. And then I give the news you need to know and some goodies or where I'm going to be and my latest podcast. We'll put this on there as soon as this airs. I'm also pretty prolific on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to take a question, and I'm pretty good with answers. So find me there as well.
And people, you should definitely read Gray Day. And then your new book coming out is going to be...
Yes, what? So early next year in 2025, my new book will be published by HarperCollins. It's called The Invisible Threat. And in this book, you're going to hear a lot of the stuff we talked about. In the first part of the book, I'm going to teach you to think like a spy, like an attacker. All the ways that they're fooling us, deceiving us, using impersonation attacks, using AI to help them with all of this. And then in the second part of the book, once you understand and you can recognize the attack, I'm going to teach you how to go on the offense and hunt the threat and be a spy hunter. So it's a lot of fun. All my beta readers have loved it. Every single person who's read the book so far has caught a cyber attack. That's how prevalent they are. And that's what I want for all my readers.
That's fantastic. Anyway, Eric, thanks again. And we look forward to seeing you on the bookshelves.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, it's time for the tinfoil swan.
Our paranoid takeaway to help keep you safe on and offline.
So the FBI just dropped a fresh warning for all of us. Cybercriminals are using compromised government email credentials in phishing schemes.
Yeah, SAM scammer tactics, new packaging. Here's how it works. Criminals get a hold of legitimate government email addresses, real ones, actually, and they use them to send an urgent official-sounding request that looks like it's coming straight from law enforcement or some other agency. Makes you want to click.
But the twist here is they're not just targeting random folks. They're going for sensitive data and trying to bypass security checks by making these requests sound urgent.
Yeah, and the FBI says that scammers have been selling these compromised credentials on the dark web for well over a year, along with step-by-step instructions on how to pull off the attacks.
So at the end of the day, it relies on just making you rush into an action like clicking a link.
And it's a reminder of what we always say. Slow down. If you get a high-pressure email with an urgent request, especially for sensitive data, don't act on it right away. Step back. Verify.
Yeah, just make sure that, what you're getting is from the place you think you're getting it from. You don't have to believe anything in an email until you confirm it. And, also, it's the government, so you don't have to respond right away. They're not going to.
And above all, stay skeptical. Even if an email looks legit, just think critically. Scammers count on you to react without thinking, so just stay one step ahead.
Bottom line, in these scams, urgency is the weapon. So the next time an email pushes you to act right now, remember that stepping back and verifying that could save you a lot of trouble.
And that's our tinfoil swan. What the Hack with Adam Levin is a production of Loud Tree Media. You can find us online at adamlevin.com and on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Adam K. Levin.
Loud Tree. Behind every empire are the people history tried to forget. Lost Roman Heroes tells the stories of the remarkable characters who shaped Rome from its mythical beginnings to its final fall.
Each episode blends armchair storytelling, sharp historical insight, and a bit of humor to bring these lost figures to life. From generals to scientists, from rebels to empresses, from priests to politicians, these lost Roman heroes have one thing in common.
They stood up for civilization when the bad guys threatened, and in doing so, they changed the course of human history. If you're into history that's vivid, surprising, and deeply human, this show's for you.
Behind every great meal is a person with a story to tell. Hear them on Culinary Characters Unlocked, the podcast that reveals the lives behind the food. Hosted by me, David Page, Emmy Award-winning journalist and creator of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, as I talk with everyone from culinary legends to mom-and-pop standouts about the creativity, grit, and passion that shape the food we love. Follow Culinary Characters Unlocked on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.